Good evening, Facebook family. Welcome to a wonderful Father's Day, beautiful Sunday. Happy Father's Day for all the awesome fathers out there. For those of you that are like me, that your father is presently not with you. He's in heaven. I want to send you my deepest heartfelt condolences because I know that feeling. My father's been dead for quite some time. But there are times in my life, it gets easier, but there are times in my life where I miss him more on a particular day than I ever have. So I'm telling you, it will get better. I just want to say again, happy Father's Day to all the awesome fathers out there, the great men that are the barrier torches for their families and their children, their grandparents, their mothers, you know, whatever it is, whether you're being a father to just in the boys club, whether you're being a father to a kid that's in the neighborhood or wherever that child may be, and whatever impact that you can play in that child's life, we are grateful for that, and happy Father's Day again to you all. I just want to tell you guys that it's been a wonderful week. I pray that everybody has had a blessed and great week, and I pray that you will have an even better week next week. But what I want to share with you all today, Brian and I have some really great information. We're all excited about the Juneteenth. I hope everybody had a great celebration of Juneteenth and you participated in it in some aspect of Juneteenth. It's been really a great awakening. It's been a great awareness for people to really read and study more about Juneteenth and what does it represent, what is it about, you know, how did we get here, how did we get to celebrate this day. You got to think about it. There are a lot of people out there that don't even know what Juneteenth is all about, Juneteenth. So we have the honor and the pleasure of having Brian, who is an amazing historian, African-American historian, that is going to bring us up to date on exactly what the meaning of Juneteenth is and what does it represent and what does it stand for African-American people. But we want to really take notes, ask questions, and be ready. So for any questions that you may have today, I have invited several people, and I hope they can get on today to tune in to this awesome segment of our show today, and also share and invite as many people as you can. Hello, Shakiria. Hello, Cam. Hello, hi. Thank you guys for coming on. I invited you all here for a particular reason. Thank you for watching with us. The information that we're going to share with you will be an eye-opening experience. So get ready. I know Phyllis is probably watching, so thank you again, Phyllis. Shout outs to you, Kuma. So Cam, thank you. So good evening again, and I am not going to prolong you. I'm going to let Brian take it right on from now. Be ready, take notes, ask questions. If there's anything that you're the least bit uncertain about or concerned about or you're not aware of, don't hesitate to ask. So no question is a dumb question. The only dumb question is the ones that you don't ask. All right? So Brian, take us on home.
All righty. Good evening, Facebook family. Good evening, YouTube family as well. Again, let me reiterate what Janice has already said. Happy Father's Day to all of my brothers out there that are striving and that are surviving, those that are overcoming. Happy Father's Day to my brothers out there in Facebook land and YouTube land. So it takes something to be a father.
Yes, it does.
You know, maybe we'll do a special one day on just fathering. The art of fathering. But it takes something to be a father. So I'm so blessed to be a father myself, and I don't take that responsibility lightly. I don't take that lightly. I really value being a father. It's been wonderful. I have 5 wonderful children that I'm just crazy about, and I'm grateful every day for God allowing them to come through myself and my wife at the time, their mother, should I say. So it's just wonderful. So, but let's get down to business, and we do want you all to ask questions. So if you have any questions, Janice is going to kind of do the moderator thing.
I'm gonna try.
She's going to try. But we want to clarify some things as it relates to Juneteenth. Briefly, on last week we went over Juneteenth. Listen, family, whenever we have the opportunity to tell our story and tell it correctly, it means the world. We should never be, and I'll say this very, very circumspectly, if you will, we should never be shy or ignorant as it relates to our own story. One thing, when you look at history, he who tells the story makes the history.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so Europeans have been telling our story for centuries. We need to correct some of the wrongs that they are telling in reference to our story. Now, when we talk about Juneteenth, briefly on last week, we discussed the origin of Juneteenth. But I want to correct some things, and I'll have to go back and look at the show last week. I don't know if I actually said this or not. But one thing that has been made prevalent as it relates to today is Juneteenth now being a federal holiday, a national holiday. Last Sunday, when we briefly talked about it, it was not a national holiday. We actually said that they had not signed the bill as it relates to Juneteenth.
But it was already out to be signed.
It was out to be signed. Now, we want to correct some history, okay? The statement that Biden makes when he signs the bill as it relates to America having to look in the face of its wrong and acknowledge its wrong, things of that nature, prior to signing the bill, he really, in his speech, he makes it seem as if they are doing us a favor by signing this bill, and that they are doing something that should have been done years ago as it relates to the country, acknowledging some of the atrocities that we went through, and our ancestors went through, I should say, as slaves. Okay, so prior to him signing the bill, he gives this little speech. But anyway, in reference to the speech, the statement is made by some of his cabinet, or his administration, I should say, made by the vice president, that this was the day, June 19, 1865, that the last of the slaves received the news that Abraham Lincoln, president of that time, 16th president of these United States, had signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and a year and a half later, they received the news that they were free. That is the summary of what the bill highlights concerning making it a national holiday. Mm-hmm. Let me say this to your family. That is totally inaccurate. Okay? Totally inaccurate. Brian, how is it inaccurate? Because June 19, 1865 was not the last day that slaves were freed. That is a historically inaccurate assessment. So let me give you some history. And I want to walk you through this history.
There's Cam Holla she said she didn't think that it was about perception.
Yes.
I didn't perceive it as such.
Right. And we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the perception. And I think that's a good point that she makes. It is the perception. I will say this, is that the narrative that media presents through propaganda is always to convince black people of something that may not actually be true. Okay? So when we look at that, the perception is, just like Cam is saying, the perception is that this is the last day of slavery. And that was inaccurate. Why was that inaccurate? Okay, let's remember this. September the 22nd, 1862, was when the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation was introduced to the Senate. Okay? January the 1st, 1863, Lincoln signs the bill of the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay? All right, so follow me on this. It's not until April of 1865 when the 13th Amendment that abolishes slavery is ratified on the House floor, meaning that there were more votes to actually accept the bill than there were to deny the bill. That did not happen until April 1865, when the 13th Amendment is ratified in 1865. That is when the emancipation, as it relates to law, goes into effect.
Yes.
Okay, so now, let me explain this to you, family. So April 1865, the ratification of, well, let me retract that, because I'm giving you the wrong date. The war ends in April of 1865. Okay, so let's correct that. The Civil War ends in April of 1865. The actual 13th Amendment is not ratified until December the 6th, 1865. Okay, so now let's go back. The war ends April 1865. In June of 1865, June 19th, 2 months later, okay, Granger steps onto the Galveston coast and reads basically an announcement, a general order, that reaffirms to those slaves in Galveston, watch this now, this is very powerful, reaffirms to those slaves in Galveston that the emancipation had been signed in 1863, okay, signed prior to the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery. Okay, so the announcement that Granger made is not that you are free in essence of the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery, but he makes an announcement as it relates to the emancipation document being signed. Okay, we talked about on last week when he signed the Abraham Lincoln signed the emancipation, when people got wind of it, as the slaves, as it trickled out through the South, okay, and the slaves got wind of it, part of that emancipation process was you no longer have to work as free labor, okay? That was part of the actual process in being emancipated. Now, what we have to remember as historians...
What's her question now? She's saying
okay.
1865, June 19. She's asking, so what is that? Basically, is that what?
1865, June 19, 1865, is considered to be the day that the slaves in Galveston recognize the emancipation document being signed in them being free by way of the Emancipation Document, not by way of the ratification of the 13th Amendment. So good question, Cam. Now, keep in mind also, this was a holiday that was pushed as it relates to Texas, not any of the other states.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So initially, and remember, after they get the news in 1865, it's not until 1 year later, 1866, that the slaves of Galveston actually commemorate that day. Why is that significant? They did not commemorate it because the 13th Amendment had not been ratified.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So they were still, a lot of them were still partially
Slaves.
in slavery. Okay. But we know that they went, those that left freely, okay, the plantation. They left freely, and we know that a lot of them, what I said last week, went on missions to find loved ones, to find immediate family members that they had been separated from. Now, let me take you back, because I want everybody to understand this. We have to understand there were 11 southern states that succeeded from the Union. When we talk about the Civil War, when we talk about the whole cause of the Civil War, we have to deal with the fact that the South, okay, had an issue with the North as it relates to the way they viewed the Constitution and how the Constitution read. Okay, this is what a lot of historians don't really, we always talk about slavery was the cause of the Civil War. No, slavery was not the cause of the Civil War. Slavery was the last measure, okay, that the kind of proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back in reference to the Civil War. Okay, what were some of the causes of the Civil War? The first thing was the difference of opinion as it relates to the construction of the Constitution. That was the number one cause of the Civil War. How the Northerners, okay, viewed the Constitution and its construction and what it said as it relates to states' sovereignty, okay, concerning the federal government. The North stated, their belief is that every state was subordinate to the central government. And they believed, the North believed, that all citizens actually owed an allegiance to the federal government. And if a citizen violated that allegiance to the federal government, then it was considered to be dishonorable and it was considered to be treason. In the South, totally different.
Wow.
Okay, the southern states, and this is why we had a succession family, the southern states believed in states' sovereignty, believed that the federal government was only there as it relates to oversight. And that what made the government strong and the Constitution work was based on state sovereignty or state rights over the government. Okay? So the South believed, family, that if a citizen went against, watch this, this is very powerful. If a citizen went against, they believed that the citizens owed their allegiance to the states.
Wow.
And if for any reason they went against the federal government or the central government, what they called the central government at that time, the South, and if it was on behalf of them fighting for states' rights, they believed that it was honorable, it was revolutionary. Okay, so when we talk about revolt, the word revolt, January the 6th, that we saw, comes from the whole concept. That is the root word for revolution, is revolt. Okay, you have revolt in revolution. That's why it's a revolution, because it's a revolt.
Yes.
Though that was actually considered to be honorable. as it relates to the southern states. Okay, so now when the southern states succeed, this is what we have to realize. Those 11 states that succeeded, they became a nation within a nation. Abraham Lincoln and what he signed had no power over that nation. They were a Confederate nation. They had their own president, Jefferson Davis. The capital for the southern states was in Montgomery, Alabama. They had a vice president, Andrew Stevens. Okay, they were their own nation. So what President Abraham Lincoln signed as it relates to the emancipation had no jurisdiction over that nation.
Wow.
Okay, do you understand that? Very powerful. So
I don't think people understand that. I really don't.
I think, and this is why I said, we have to tell the story correctly. Okay? Now, let me throw a caveat in there. Let me go back, even if I'm going to go back a little bit further, what actually positioned the South and the North, the conflict. Okay? Do you know what happened significantly in 1793? 1793, Eli Whitney visits the state of Georgia, okay? Visits a plantation, General Greene from the Revolutionary War, visit his plantation in 1793.
That was Eli Whitney, right?
Eli Whitney, okay? Visits the plantation, begins to have a conversation with one of the slaves that's picking cotton out in the fields. And as he's conversating with this slave, he asks the slave, what are you using to separate the seed from the fiber? Now, history records, and part of the story as it's been told, that the name of the slave was Sam. Sam told him that the apparatus that he was using to separate the seed from the fiber was given to him and created by his father from Africa. And that this apparatus, he taught him that how in Africa they had certain apparatuses to separate the wheat, to separate the seed from the actual plant. And this was part of that apparatus. Eli Whitney takes that, goes back to Massachusetts, and mechanizes the comb that Sam is using on the Greene plantation in the state of Georgia to make the cotton gin. From that point, Southern slaves go from over 150,000 slaves to almost 3.5 million between 1793 and the start of the Civil War. The South goes from being penniless and profitless to becoming the wealthiest states in the Union. Okay, so this is very, very powerful within itself. From that point, the war starts brewing, okay? Because now you've got states that want to come in as slaveholding states. You got the Eastern Territory that doesn't want to come in, okay? And they want to totally abolish slavery. So there's an argument as it relates to capital. And at that time, the word capital actually means wealth. And the South took the stand that capital should own labor. Okay? Mm-hmm. The North took the stand that capital should not own labor and that labor should be rendered a sacrifice that should receive payment. Okay? So they did not believe that wealth should own labor like the South did. They believed that wealth produces labor that you pay in reference to the labor that the wealth helps produce. Okay? So this is what actually starts the feuding between the northern and the southern states. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? So that is very, very powerful to know. When did the ratification of the 13th Amendment take place by the federal government? It took place December the 6th, 1865. December the 6th, 1865, between Kentucky and Delaware, there was still 225,000 slaves in bondage in Kentucky and Delaware. This is 6 months after June 19th, 1865, when Granger steps onto the shores of Galveston, Texas, and announces that the emancipation had been signed and that the slaves were emancipated based off of the document if the Union soldiers had come in and taken possession of the land and had secured certain perimeters and certain borders. Okay, some of the border states in the South slavery was still going on. In the great state of Alabama, Alabama did not ratify the 13th Amendment until December the 2nd, 1865. Alabama was still full-blown into slavery. And the only reason Alabama, because it was the capital of the Confederacy, the only reason that they ratified the 13th Amendment is because the Union stated that they were going to cut off any type of aid, export, import. Alabama would have been totally isolated. It would have been a Haiti in its own nation. Okay? So for those of us, when we talk about our history, there was a reason that the federal government pushed, okay, June 19th as a federal holiday. See, this is not something that is new. The June 19th concept has been around in Congress for over 30 years. This is not the first time this has been introduced. It was introduced by Trent Lott, who was the senator of Mississippi, one of the racist states in the Confederacy. Okay. It was introduced when Clinton was also in office. Okay. That June 19th should be the day that is celebrated as the end of slavery. That was pushed by white racists in the Senate. Family, watch this now. Over 30 years ago, introduced that the 19th should be the day that we all celebrate June 19th. Okay, so now what we have is a backlash. I won't say that it has even come full circle. If there was no murder, open assassination rather, of George Floyd, there would have been no June 19th signing of any bill, because it would have still been circulating through Congress like it's been doing for the last 30 years.
Repeat that again, Brian. Say that one more time.
If it was not for the assassination of George Floyd, there would not have been a June 19th day, a holiday, federal holiday. Now, this is the thing. Instead of them giving you a George Floyd Police Act, they signed a federal holiday where to pacify black folks and tell us to go ahead and get your party on. Guess why? Because immediately they started commercializing Juneteenth. How can we make money from these Negroes? Remember, I told you that part of the South concept was, watch this, capital should own labor, wealth should own labor. Okay, so immediately they commercialize Juneteenth, tell you to celebrate, tell you to go party,
go spend money,
cook out.
Yes.
All of these things are done now as a scheme to pacify and to appease us, to take us off of the real issue.
That's it,
okay?
Ron.
So what are the real issues? We are still
racial injustices.
Okay. Still behind in education.
Education.
What are some of the other issues? We still are as far as wealth in this country, the least wealthiest people group in this nation. Okay, so when we look at our problems, why did they just force that down our throats? Okay, it's also for them to say, well, we're giving you a holiday to honor slavery ending. No, slavery did not end June 19th, 1865. If we wanted to celebrate a true holiday for Alabamians, slavery didn't end until December the 2nd, 1865, and for the nation, slavery did not end until December the 6th, 1865, when the House ratified the 13th Amendment. And the 225,000 slaves that were on the border states of Kentucky and Delaware finally received notice that they were free. Okay, so the government, we cannot afford to allow them to continue to tell our story. Okay, we have to tell our own story. Now the Juneteenth celebration is about fireworks, barbecues, parties. What I said last week, if we are truly want to honor our ancestors, then we need to do more so of commemorating. Commemoration by way of telling their story.
Yes.
Correctly. Not so much out partying, drinking,
barbecuing,
running around like we are still on the plantation without a clue. Okay? So the government, this was done intentionally. And at the same time that they were announcing June 19th is going to be a federal holiday, in Alabama, they were rescinding all of the workman's compensation bill and all of the...
All that came to an end on June 19th.
June 19th.
Governor Kay Ivey stated this back in April.
Absolutely. That everything that the government had put in place, that's right, for the pandemic to help those that were unemployed, all of that was coming to an end on June 19th. So while Negroes are celebrating,
come on, Brian,
we are being bamboozled. So what we have to do, it is important now. I don't expect everybody to know the history, but those of us that do know the history, we need to tell our story. We need to tell it correctly so that people are aware of some of the schemes that are still being run on us even today.
You know, Brian, somebody asked me, I was telling them that the unemployment compensations were coming to an end on June 19th. Okay? And they said, well, why? That's not so, because that's a Saturday. Why would it be on a Saturday? That would, you know, nobody works, you know, most of the government employees are off on the weekend. So why would she end it on a Saturday? Why not a Friday or a Monday or a Tuesday or any other day, Monday through Friday? But she chose Saturday to remind us, you think we're giving you something, you're getting something from the government by getting this big celebration. Well, I'm going to show you. We're going to take something else, something of value away from you.
It's a subtle reminder that you have no power. That is, you know, because what the state of Alabama did was say that the official day that all of these benefits will come to an end is Saturday. We're putting it in place where it cuts off on Friday. 12 midnight Saturday, what we cut off on Friday goes into effect. Okay, to remind us that we have the power. So now you got to go back to, it's important for us to understand how the Southern, I guess, mentality, how the Southern mind works, how the Southern mind thinks. When we look at Kay Ivey, she's an old racist. Okay, that's why she didn't the monuments and all of these other things that she's bulked over the years. She really is an old, staunch, racist.
Hardcore.
And I really need to do a whole show about the European women and their promotion of slavery and their promotion. They wanted to keep slavery in place more so than their male counterparts. And some of the things that they did to further advance the movement. So when you look at the Daughters of the Confederacy, those women were very, very powerful. They held a lot of authority and influenced a lot of policies that went into place as it relates to the black codes, as it relates to Jim Crow laws, all of those things. So when black women align with white women and think that white women, especially Southern women, have their interest in mind, they're being subtly manipulated and deceived back into the old concept that white women run everything. See, if my man is in power, I'm in power. That was always the mentality, but that's another show. All right, so, but we have to understand, that Juneteenth, as honorable of a day as it is. So I'm not telling you not to commemorate the day. We said on last week, be safe, commemorate the day,
yes.
to take time to reflect as it relates to our ancestors, things of that nature. Make the day a day of honor.
Now, Cam is saying something, sweetheart.
So is it fair to say there were more blacks getting assistance? Is this why you think Ivy was so quick to move forward with this holiday? I would say absolutely. I would say that the whole, when we look at the census, we know, Sister Cam, that the blacks were not getting more benefits when you look at the state of Alabama as a whole. Now, in Montgomery, the census shows that more blacks were receiving benefits because Montgomery is 95% African American. So in some spots, but the overall census shows that there were more whites receiving benefits, poor whites, and there were more Hispanics receiving benefits than blacks were. Okay, so what she did was a slap in the face as it relates to poor people in general. To say that we own you. We pretty much dictate what you can do, what you can't do. We dictate that's where it goes back to state sovereignty. We will cut this off even if the federal government extends it. We don't have to extend it. In our state, we're cutting this off. Some states actually extended.
They did.
The benefits.
They did.
Okay. The Alabama wasn't one. Georgia wasn't one. South Carolina wasn't one, where the Civil War starts. Okay. So all of these things, the significance of Georgia, South Carolina, like I said, the whole Civil War starts brewing after Eli Whitney takes the idea from a slave, Sam, back and mechanized the comb, and which later becomes, in the mechanized form, the cotton gin. Okay? So what we have to realize is, and kudos to our ancestors that were brilliant. There were so many inventions that were stolen. Okay? But that Southern mind, Eli Whitney became a billionaire. He would be the Jeff Bezos of his era, the Warren Buffetts of his era.
From an idea
from a invention
that was created by
a slave father who stated that they combed out seeds in Africa. And this is how they would separate the shaft and the wheat and all of these. They had these apparatuses already. So just amazing when we look at it. But to go back to Galveston, Texas, June 19, 1865. So, fam, that was not the day that the last slaves were freed. Okay? That was the day simply that Texas received notification that the emancipation had been signed. It should not be a national holiday that we celebrate as relates to slavery ending, because slavery did not end June 19, 1865.
That's correct.
The slaves of Georgia, the African people of Georgia were still enslaved. African people in Alabama were still enslaved. African people in Mississippi were still enslaved.
Yes, they were, huh?
Okay. Mississippi did not ratify the 13th Amendment until 2017.
Sharon, I need you on this one. Sharon White, where are you?
My fact finders, go back and
go back, Sharon, Cam, Marisha.
Listen, Mississippi is just now ratifying the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery in their state just several years ago.
I don't hear anybody coming on with that. I need y'all to
please
say something.
Go back and check that. Texas did not ratify the 13th Amendment until 1870. Okay, so now, what am I showing you? I'm showing you that this government, okay, that we, I guess we try to hold to a certain standard. We try to hold them to a certain standard. We need to make sure, more so than holding them to a certain standard, that we hold ourselves to a certain standard.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yes.
And that standard should be that we need, from this point moving forward, to make sure that when something is presented before the Congress and when bills are signed, we ought to be jumping up and down and screaming to make sure that those things are actually correct as it relates to honoring us, as it relates to, because the only thing that Congress will do for black people is give us platitudes. They'll give us commemorable plaques.
Janice just said it is so true about Mississippi. That's
Thank
it. Thank you, Janice.
They give us commemorable plaques.
Yeah.
They give us, Martin Luther King was the first holiday as far as a national black holiday. Okay, now this is the second holiday. They make it seem as if that is reparations for us,
which is not.
Okay, they'll give us a few street names and allow us to change names of streets and things like that. But other than that, they pretty much have ruled out doing anything significant that would change the lives
of our people,
of black people.
That's right.
In this country. See, the South still believe that capital should own labor. They still believe that they should own slaves.
What does Sharon say? Baby?
That concept was never done away with.
When will you?
Okay, we can discuss that, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yes, we will discuss the 1619 project, and we can also discuss the 1776 project as well that Trump proposed as a rebuttal to the 1619 project. Okay, so Sharon, I'll do a show of that. That is very powerful.
Powerful,
so
Sharon.
We'll talk about that, and we can look at all angles of that. But all of this plays into, and now another thing that I want you all, family, to be conscious and aware of is the whole concept of what they're calling critical race theory. Okay, which you have one side saying that it needs to be taught. What is critical race theory? It is simply a curriculum that is being proposed that teaches that part of American history is those Africans that were enslaved, that were brought to this country and that were enslaved, and the effects of their enslavement by the system itself. So they deal with all of the systematic structures that involve slavery. Some of those systematic structures was education. Okay, some of the some more of those systematic structures would be your financial system,
yes,
which basically left us out of being able to have wealth, and kind of wrote us out of the plan as it relates to generating and accumulating monies to pass down. So that's that generational wealth gap, all of those things. But yeah, so we'll talk about critical race theory as well as.
And Sharon wants us to do a whole show about it.
Yeah, we'll do a whole show.
We'll do a whole show about that shit.
Yes, we'll do that. That'll be a good show.
And Cam, we're here every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Every Sunday at 6:30, unless we're on vacation. Every Sunday at 6:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Give us some more facts, Brian.
All righty. So, like I said, the June 19th, 1865, Galveston, Texas. Once Granger announces that the emancipation had been signed and that the slaves, if they wanted to leave the plantation, they could leave. Now, here's the caveat that was in his general order. Part of the general order encouraged them to stay slaves. Fam, check me out now. Fact check me. Part of his general order encouraged those that he was telling that the emancipation had been signed to abolish slavery, even though the 13th Amendment had not yet been ratified, so you really can't go nowhere. So, but what I want you to know is it's in the works. So now if you choose to leave the plantations, we can't give you anything at this time.
You can't get a dime.
Okay, because the Union troops have not been set up and stationed. See, what we also have to remember is what I call the Texas debacle, the Texas Reformation. See,
yes.
Texas plays a significant part in this history as well. Okay, so the annexation of Texas, which happens in 1845, plays a significant role after the Mexican War. Okay, so Texas becomes a prominent slaveholding state. Not only that, when you look at the Mexican War, Mexico was a slaveholding nation. So what you had was some plantation owners coming to Texas by way of the border and setting up their plantation after the Mexican War and Mexico loses. Okay, so you have a shifting from one country into the next, and yet slavery is still the dominant source of labor by way of making wealth. That's very powerful. Now, so General Granger reads his general order and says, look, this is the deal. Lincoln signs the emancipation. If you want to leave the plantation, do it at your own risk. And I'm just keeping it practical, guys, paraphrasing this. Do it at your own risk. If you stay, the plantation owner has to pay you some form of compensation, even if it's just 1 cent. Here's the thing. They never highlight in the general order how much they should be compensated as it relates to their labor. That is still left up to the plantation owner. Okay, so the plantation owner, listen at this, family, could actually say, instead of us giving you money, we'll give you food as compensation.
Come on now.
Understand what I'm saying? And like I said, just making it practical. We'll give you food as compensation. Instead of you getting 1 meal a day, we'll give you 3 meals a day.
Two.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
It is not funny, but at the same time,
it's really sad.
It is laughable when our government tells us this ended slavery, lie to us blatantly in our face, and say that those that were slaves in Galveston, Texas, because Granger shows up and read his general order, that all of those people were set free.
And that
ended slavery when all of the other southern states still had slaves. And the 13th Amendment had not been ratified. It's a slap in our face. It is a lie. It says to me that black people believe anything because they still can't read. Okay, so some of us can read.
Okay, Glenn.
And those of us that can read, we're going to tell all the rest of the slaves that's on the plantation with us that they're lying. Okay, so what we want you to know tonight, family, is they are lying. 1865, June 19th, did not end slavery. That was not the day that the last of the black folks that were enslaved were set free. I'm sorry, it just wasn't. It's just inaccurate information that needs to be corrected, and we should not celebrate June 19th as a form of a form of ending slavery. What we should do is commemorate it as a Texas Day holiday, in Galveston particularly, because there were other parts of Texas that still had slaves that had not been freed.
Wow.
Okay, so what we should do is recognize it, commemorate it. If you're going to celebrate it by giving the correct history, what we've been saying this whole program, factual history. Our former Senator Doug Jones of Alabama goes on national news and talks about we need to correct some things as it relates to this nation in slavery. And he makes a whole statement and gives a diatribe about, 1865 Juneteenth, and we need to celebrate it because it ends slavery. This nation needs to correct. And Doug Jones just lied. You understand? So all of these senators, and what we have to understand. Now, I will say this. The Republican senators that did not sign the bill to make Juneteenth, kudos to them. You know why? Because I can respect people that will look me dead in the eye and let me know this is how I feel. I don't feel that you all deserve anything. I'm a white racist. I'm a white nationalist, and I represent my people. I respect them more than somebody sitting at a seat signing a bill and covertly they hate everything about black people. Okay, and they really don't want to do anything for black people and not going to do anything for black people except for give them platitudes and good speeches. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
I respect those senators that says, no, this is not what we represent. This is not what we stand for. We need some black senators and congressmen that will stand up and say, this is what we represent. We love black people. This is what we want to do for black people. This is what we're going to fight for. And we're going to get out and rally them around true benefits that will help education, that will stop police brutality, that will correct the financial gap, that will offer good health care. We're really going to fight for them, and we're not concerned about the diversity movement at this moment, just like the white nationalists isn't.
That's exactly right.
We're concerned about black people that have been affected by the rudiments of slavery based on their ancestors not receiving justice. We want to finally turn that around and give our black children that's hanging out on the street corners, that cannot find jobs, that's not graduating from high school,
that are murdering each other.
That's right, that you're putting guns in their hands every day.
Yes.
Okay, with the gun cartel. Okay, all of these are things that we need representation for.
Do we have anybody, Brian, that's doing
Well, the
that?
Black Caucus was there. Hoorah, hoorah. I call them the Black Caucasians. That's why you got the word caucus is a prefix to Caucasian. So The black Caucasians. France Fanon says that they are, black face with white mask. They black mask with white face. They got a white mind. They're the black Caucasians. They were there to hoorah and to wave the banner. Yay, we got a holiday. It just doesn't make sense. I have not seen. At this point, we have to hold our organizations and our people accountable. I love black people. I think black people, if we don't stop allowing people to give us what they want and demand what we want and need, then we're always going to be in this predicament, unfortunately, because they just forced this holiday on us. They shoved it down our throat. This bill was signed so fast. Now, you've had George Floyd Act that's been, that bill has been on the floor how many months now? Over a year.
Over a year. The George Floyd Act.
Over a year.
And has not been.
And it has gone nowhere, but yet you can, in 2 days, push a federal holiday onto us so that it can be commercialized, so that black people can spend more money. We already broke. The saying that the rich gets richer and the poor gets poor, that was made relative based off of our community. You understand? So, and I would have to take you back and show you how black communities that were very wealthy, black communities that were doing good. We commemorated the 1921 Tulsa bombing. And we talked briefly about the Tulsa, Oklahoma situation. But there were so many other black Wall Streets. But you got to look at Wilmington, North Carolina. You got to look at Washington. You even have to come home and look in Alabama. So the government has always been complicit at making sure that black people do not have the same opportunities as other groups. So when we look at what was significant about Black Wall Street is not the actual destruction of Black Wall Street, as significant as that was. I don't want to minimize that because that was a massacre. But what was more powerful than that was Black Wall Street made a comeback, and it was more wealthy after that massacre than it was prior to. They don't discuss that.
They don't discuss that.
Do you know why they don't discuss it?
Why is that?
Because what destroyed Black Wall Street the second time was the introduction of integration into our community. When integration hit, Tulsa and the Greenwood community, it totally wiped them out, silenced them forever. No comeback after the second massacre called integration. So these are things, and see that the integration piece, I still say this, and I'm going to say this until I get a chance to talk to Brother Martin face to face when I transition out of here. Dr. King did not push integration from a philosophical standpoint as it relates to everybody just mingling and being together. That was pushed by those that were around him. That was pushed by some of the leadership in SCLC that said this is what is going to give us an opportunity for or a chance for equality. It was pushed by the Ralph Abernathy's. It was pushed by the Andrew Youngs. We need to really study our history to understand that some of the things that we are being, that's why the government continues today to push Dr. King in the schools. Because as long as they can make us feel like we cannot do it by ourselves, when we successfully did it by ourselves over and over and over, and guess what? It was better than what they did. So now the narrative is that integration makes you better. What that does is it removes the stigma, you understand, of you being able to do something on your own. Now it handicaps you and make you a subservient person to those that created the concept of government, that you were doing better than their so-called creation. Because we had government from where we came from. They learned from us. That's why we flourished in it. So now the narrative is teach your kids about King, okay, in the schools. And I love King, but we're not teaching them the correct narrative. See, we do not teach them about the Dr. King that says, hold up, something's wrong here. We need our check. Yeah. They don't teach them about the Dr. King that says that, no, I've led my people
in a burning building. I'm
afraid that that's right. They're going into a situation, and me paraphrasing this, that is not conducive for their progress. So I'm backing away from this, and I'm fixing to back them away from this. You understand?
Yes.
So the Poor People's Campaign wasn't a diversity campaign like we see Reverend Barber promoting. Okay? The Poor People's Campaign was for the black sanitation workers in Tennessee. We need to understand, it was about black people receiving equal wages in this country. It wasn't about everybody poor. Dr. King was focusing on black folks that are receiving less for doing the same job or more. So what we have to do, family, is we have to go back to the basics. Okay? History in our school is not being taught correctly.
No, it's not.
You understand?
We know that.
This June 19th celebration that was pushed down our throat
is not
correct. It did not end slavery. Okay? June 19, 1865 did not end slavery, and it wasn't the last slaves that were freed. It just wasn't, family. Okay? December the 6th, 1865, and we're going to celebrate the end of slavery and the last slaves being freed. It needs to be December the 6th, 1865, when the 13th Amendment was ratified and slavery was finally abolished.
But some states still held on.
Some states did not even ratify it until after then. A lot of your border states did not ratify it. And like I said, Texas did not ratify the 13th Amendment until 1870. So majority of the slaves that were still in Texas, they did not actually experience freedom until 1870. We have to refuse for history to be given to us on a plate that says that here's your steak and lobster. Now, get on down the road. We don't want to fool with you anymore. We're giving you a little, here's your platitudes. We're done with you. And that's what we are allowing this government to do. That's what we allow people, the systems to do. The education system, that's what we are allowing them to do when we allow them to give our history to us incorrectly. Okay? So, any more questions, fam? Hey, Brother Jermichael.
Hello.
Thank you for joining. Yeah.
That was one. What was that one? I can't see.
Let's see. I can't see it. What does it say? Oh, these eyes are mine.
Well, it's gone up some.
Okay. Douglas said, justice of full. I can't.
Okay, we'll read it. Yeah, so, do you have anything to give us, Brian, before you leave us?
That is about it. Family, I just wanted to share those thoughts with you, give you a correct summary of the Juneteenth, this narrative that they've painted, and to show you that this is historically is just incorrect. It is wrong. So we have to continue to correct those narratives when they give it to us like that, and they shove it down our throats,
yes,
and then make it appear that we are getting something. We aren't getting anything. Why aren't you just as vehement and progressive about reparations in the H.R. 40 bill that's been in Congress over 30 years now?
Wow.
Introduced by John Conyers. Up until the day he transitioned, he introduced that bill on the floor every day from 1989 all the way up to his transition until Sheila Jackson Lee took it over. So why aren't you we've been talking about 30 years. Why aren't you just as progressive about getting that bill pushed through? So what we have to do is we shouldn't accept them just giving us anything.
Where, Brian, what it appears to me as though is that H.R. 40 would cost the government money, whereas Juneteenth would make them money.
Excellent point, sweetie. Excellent point.
Okay.
You're absolutely right, and that is a good way to actually end the show.
That's it.
Reparations would not cost them more than the labor that we put into this country and made it wealthy.
Exactly.
Okay? So remember that. Reparations would not cost this country. If you could come up with a pandemic package to where you shell out $1.2 billion and then come back with trillions of dollars, if you can do that at the behest of, watch this now, at the behest of a world epidemic, and then manufacture vaccines that you're now sending all over the world. Now I know these other countries are having to pay the United States for sending that, and that's how they're recouping some of this money.
Yes. Okay,
but when you can come up with a $13 trillion package, pandemic package, just out of the air, no one can say that this government could not, if they want to. When you could pay the Japanese survivors $20,000 apiece and pay their descendants. And the Japanese started the war. We didn't start the war. We were victims of the war. You understand? I mean, we didn't ask them to come over to Africa and take up. You understand what I'm saying? We didn't ask to be slaves. We were free men and women.
Yes.
But you can come up with money to take care of everybody else. Then not only that, when you look at the black soldiers that came back from the war, they were treated worse than the Germans. The Germans were heralded over here in the United States. Most of your scientists were German scientists. Germans were even in our government, formed in secret service and became our leading engineers. The Germans that we were just fighting, and you give them all kind of job, treat them better than our soldiers. Something's wrong, family. Something is drastically wrong when we can look at that and don't say anything and then celebrate about a holiday that is incorrect. I just, forgive me for getting a little bit excited.
That's okay. That's all right.
But something's wrong with the black mind. We can sit back and say, I'm okay with this holiday. No, I'm not okay. I'm mad because you lied. It's a lie that Juneteenth 19th was the end of slavery. That's a lie. It's a lie that those was the last slaves freed. It's just a lie. What you're feeding us is what we've been fed for over 400 years, a pack of lies. Nothing about the federal government giving us a holiday is hopeful. There's nothing about that that's hopeful. But it's actually the opposite to me. because it tells me that they think that we're still insubordinate. They think that we're still, borderline idiots. It tells me that they look at black people as in a certain light. They're just, we pacify them, give them bread.
Crumbs. Breadcrumbs.
You understand what I'm saying?
They ain't giving us whole bread. They're giving us breadcrumbs.
That's the way it is.
Because it's not costing them anything.
That's exactly right. Caesar said in Rome, you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Give them bread and water, and that satisfied the peasants. While we make the laws to continue to promote those that are wealthy. And that's basically what it boils down to when it comes to black people in this country. They're peasants. Give them bread and water, give them a little holiday here. They acknowledge this, that yes, slavery, we know it was wrong.
Give them a certificate or a plaque.
That's right. And let them go on about their business. We have to get in the fight. Okay? Does everybody understand? Education, deprivation, deprivation should be, yes. So and you're right. Education deprivation is what the government focuses on when it comes to black people. Continue to deprive them of education. Like I said, all we had to do was challenge ourselves. And I did. That's, like I said, I know everybody's not going to go back and I don't expect everybody to be a historian.
Right.
Okay. But those of us that value history and that want to tell the story correctly, those educators that are historians, these are times that we need to correct not on anybody that gives us false information and tell our story the right way so that our children understand actually what the government is trying to do and what truly has happened to us. You understand? So we have to get back to those things. Hold each other accountable. Yesterday, Montgomery had 3 or 4 celebrations.
Yeah, starting Friday.
Yeah. And I don't know.
Selma had several celebrations yesterday.
And probably not at one of those celebrations that they give the correct history as it relates to Juneteenth. Now, I don't know if they did or not, but I'm just saying that I doubt it very seriously that anybody came out and said, hold up, we're commemorating this day not because it ended slavery, not because it freed the last of the slaves, but we're commemorating this day because June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas, there was an acknowledgement that the emancipation had been signed and there was a general order that was read as it relates to making sure that these slaves received the same information that had gone abroad to other southern states. Because like I said, border states were still enslaved. Some of the southern states were still enslaved. So we need to think about that. And some of those middle states that still had slaves in the north, what we call north. So you're talking about New York, you're talking about Pennsylvania, New Jersey, some of those states, see, that was part of the Union that had slaves. When Abraham Lincoln signs the Emancipation, it doesn't apply to them because those states had started an abolishment process to where the states were actually trying to deal with slavery. So he never addressed those states. He only addressed the states that succeeded from the Union. So the northern states had every right to continue to hold their slaves as they worked on the abolishment process as it related to their state government. So that's why Harriet was still fighting. Harriet was in a border northern state. That's why she had to go back and get all those slaves in a border northern state. She wasn't down south. So family, listen, it's very important that we know our history,
Because our ancestors are looking on us and they're saying, no, you tell the story. You tell the story. We'll give you the information and you tell the story. So all the research we do, we make sure we can reference it. Okay. This is, and I want to show y'all this. Let's see what this thing. This is the history of the United States, published in 1877. Family. Everything you want to know about the origins of how these United States of America came to be. Now, even some of the words in here, they're not in our dictionaries now. Some of the old English words from Britain.
Yes.
And I have to actually Google the words to try to find out the definitions. But it is very powerful. In this book, they give 5 causes for the Civil War. Okay. Slavery was the 4th cause of the Civil War. And like I said, they did not call it slavery. They got in quotation slavery. But they said labor, wealth-owning labor. That's what the Southern delegates and leaders were concerned about. They felt that wealth should always own labor. And that is the same concept today. Wealth should own labor. I can pay you what I want to pay you. I pay you what. See, the federal government is stipulating a minimum wage. Okay? But those that are wealthy said, no, we pay you what we want to pay you. And as long as we're paying you, you should be okay with that. Okay? So that is the whole concept of the Old South. Wealth owns labor. All right. So think about this. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, was supposedly the wealthiest man in the world. Him, Elon Musk, and then Bill Gates fell down since his divorce, and Warren Buffett. Those are the 4 of the wealthiest men in the world. When you think about the money that Amazon makes, I think they said it's like right at $2 billion a day. If they paid you $50 an hour starting off, that is like $1 in ratio to what it makes a day. Wow. So we don't think like that. You understand what I'm saying? Wealth owns labor. Okay. So that's a show, another show too. But anyway, I'm done, sweetie. I'm done, family. I'm done.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you all for watching tonight. Oh, Cam, thank you. Janice Davis, Cam Holla, Phyllis Moore, Marisha. God, it's so many of you all. Jermichael Splunge, Cassandra Stewart, my cousin.
Janice Davis.
Oh, we love you guys. We thank you.
Thank you so
from the
much.
bottom of our heart for watching this. Brian works so hard. A lot of it, it's just in him. He doesn't know anything else. He knows everything, but this is what he lives to do. Sharon, thank you so much, Sharon.
Yes.
And we're going to do just what you asked us to do. Brian's going to follow you up on that. Next week.
Next week, we will talk about the 1619 project versus the 1776 project.
Got you, Sharon. Right. We got you, girl. So you guys, again, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We appreciate you so much. Go out, share this video. I tell everybody, share. People need to hear about it. Absolutely. They really need to know. We don't tell it. We got to tell it. I tell it everywhere. I go. Yeah. So please, it has changed my life. Absolutely. It has really changed my life. It has gotten me in some places and opened some doors that normally I probably couldn't have gotten in. Mm-hmm. And that's a blessing.
It is.
Because people respect you. Mm-hmm. The other kind, they respect you because you know who you are.
Absolutely.
That is what they look for. It's the ones that don't know that they take advantage of. But when you know who you are, they can't tell you any different.
Absolutely.
And I love that. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you all, guys. Remember, December the 6th, 1865, 225,000 slaves between Kentucky and Delaware were freed.
Thank you.
When the 13th Amendment was finally ratified and abolished slavery. Thank you all. God bless. Godspeed. We're out of here.
We love you guys. See you next week.